Listen to your heart when he's calling for you. Oh, hi. Hi, it's Professor Phlim. I was singing one of my favorite 80s songs. Okay, just to recap, we were reading Gregor the Overlander, and it was for Benjamin Kaiser. And what happened in the book on page 10 was that Gregor is in the laundry room with his sister Boots, who's 2, she's adorable, and they're doing laundry. So let's continue. Page 10. The washer spun to a stop, and Gregor piled the clothes into a couple of dryers. And when he gets home back, he better have a really good explanation for where he's been, muttered Gregor as he slammed the dryer door shut. Like he got bumped on the head and forgot who he was, or he was kidnapped by aliens. Lots of people got kidnapped by aliens on TV. Maybe it could happen. Remember, he's talking about his dad being gone in an explanation. He thought about different possibilities a lot in his head, but they rarely mentioned his dad at home. There was an unspoken agreement that his dad would return. All the neighbors thought he'd just taken off. The adults never mentioned it, and neither did most of the kids. About half of them only lived with one parent anyway. Strangers sometimes asked, though. After about a year of trying to explain it, Gregor came up with the story that his parents were divorced and his dad lived in California. It was a lie, but people believed it, while no one seemed to believe the truth, whatever it was. And after he gets home, I can take him, Gregor said aloud, and then stopped himself. He was about to break the rule. The rule was that he couldn't think about things that would happen after his dad got back. And since his dad could be back at any moment, Gregor didn't allow himself to think about the future at all. He had this weird feeling that if he imagined actual events like having his dad back next Christmas or his dad helping to coach the track team, they would never happen. Besides, as happy as some daydream would make him, it only made returning to reality more painful. So that was the rule. Gregor had to keep his mind in the present and leave the future to itself. He realized that his system wasn't great, but it was the best way he'd figure out how to get through a day. Gregor noticed that Boots had been suspiciously quiet. He looked around and felt alarmed when he couldn't spot her right away. Then he saw a scuffed pink sandal poking out from the last dryer. "Boots, get out of there," Gregor said. You had to watch her around electrical stuff. She loved plugs. As he hurried across the laundry room, Gregor heard a metallic clunk and then a giggle from Boots. Great, now she's dismantling the dryer, thought Gregor, picking up speed. As he reached the far wall, a strange scene confronted him. The metal grate to an old air duct was wide open, secured by 2 rusty hinges at the top. Boots was squinting into the opening, about 2 feet by 2 feet, which led into the wall of the building. From where he stood, Gregor could see nothing but blackness. Then a wisp of, what was it? Steam? Smoke? It didn't really look like either. Some strange vapor drifted out of the hole and curled around Boots. She held out her arms curiously and leaned forward. "No!" yelled Gregor as he lunged for her, but Boots's tiny frame seemed to be sucked into the air duct. Without thinking, Gregor thrust his head and shoulders into the hole. The metal grate smacked into his back. The next thing he knew, he was falling down, down, down into empty space. That concludes chapter 1. On to chapter 2. This chapter is for you, Evan Jaramillo, my little amigo. Okay, sorry. I need to wash my hair. Do you see that? Sorry, kids. Chapter 2. Gregor twisted around in the air, trying to position himself so he wouldn't land on Boots when they hit the basement floor, but no impact came. Then he remembered the laundry room was in the basement, so what exactly had they fallen into? The wisp of vapor had thickened into a dense mist that generated a pale light. Gregor could see only a few feet in any direction. His fingers clawed desperately through the white stuff, looking for a handhold, but came up empty. He was plummeting downward so fast, his clothes ballooned around him. "Boots!" he hollered, and the sound bounced eerily back to him. There must be sides to this thing, he thought. He called again, "Boots!" A bright giggle came from somewhere below him. "Giggle-wee!" said Boots. She thinks she's on a big slide or something, thought Gregor. At least she's not scared. He felt scared enough for the both of them. Whatever strange hole they had slipped into, it must have had a bottom. There was only one way that this spinning through the space could end. Time was passing. Gregor couldn't tell exactly how much, but too much to make sense. Surely there was a limit to how deep a hole could be. At some point, you'd have to run into water or rock or the Earth's platelets or something. It was all like this horrible dream that he had sometimes. He'd be up high somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, usually like the roof of his school. As he walked along the edge, the solid matter under his feet would suddenly give way. Down he'd go. Everything would disappear but the sensation of falling, of the ground closing in on him, of terror. Then, just at that moment of impact, he'd jerk awake, soaked in sweat, heart pounding. A dream. I fell asleep in the laundry room, and this is the same old crazy dream, thought Gregor. Of course, what else could it be? Calmed by the notion that he was asleep, Gregor began to gauge his fall. He didn't own a wristwatch, but anybody could count seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 70 Mississippi, he gave up and began to feel panicky again. Even in a dream, you had to land, right? Just then, Gregor noticed the mist beginning to clear a little. He could make out the smooth, dark sides of a circular wall. He seemed to be falling down a large, dark tube. He felt an updraft rising from below him. The last wisps of vapor blew away, and Gregor lost speed. His clothes gently settled back on his body. Below him, he heard a small thump, and then the patter of Boots' sandals. A few moments later, his own feet made contact with solid ground. Excuse me, children, I have grass in my hair. A few moments later, his own feet made contact with solid ground. He tried to get his bearings, not daring to move. Total darkness surrounded him. As his eyes adjusted, he became aware of a faint shaft of light off to the left. A happy squeak came from behind it. Bug! Big bug! Gregor ran toward the light. It leaked through a narrow crevice between two small walls of rock. He barely managed to squeeze himself through the opening. His sneaker caught on something, causing him to lose his balance. He tripped out from between the rock walls and landed on his hands and knees. When he raised his head, Gregor found himself looking into the face of the largest cockroach he'd ever seen. Now, his apartment complex had some big bugs. Mrs. Cormacy claimed a water bug the size of her hand had climbed out of her bathtub drain, and nobody doubted her. But the creature in front of Gregor rose at least 4 feet in the air. Granted, it was sitting up on its back legs, a very unnatural-looking position for a cockroach, but still. Big bug! Cried Boots again, and Gregor managed to close his mouth. He pushed back onto his knees, but he still had to tilt his head back to see the roach. It was holding some kind of torch. Boots scampered over to Gregor and tugged on the neck of his shirt. Big bug, she insisted. Yes, I see, Boots. Big bug, said Gregor in a hushed voice, wrapping his arms tightly around her. Very big bug. He tried hard to remember what cockroaches ate. Garbage, rotten food. People? He didn't think they ate people, not the little ones anyway. Maybe they wanted to eat people, but they kept getting stepped on first. At any rate, this wasn't a good time to find out. Trying to appear casual, Gregor slowly edged his way back toward the crack in the rocks. Okay, Mr. Roach, so we'll just be going now. Sorry we bothered you. Smells what so good? Smells what? A voice hissed, and it took Gregor a full minute to realize it had come from the cockroach. He was too stunned to make any sense of the strange words. Excuse me? He managed. Smells what so good? Smells what? The voice hissed again. But the tone wasn't threatening, just curious, and maybe a little excited. Be small human, be? All right, okay, I'm talking to a giant cockroach, thought Gregor. Be cool, be nice, answer the bug. He wants to know, smells what so good, smells what? So tell him. Gregor forced himself to take a deep sniff and then regretted it. Only one thing smelled like that. I poop, said Boots, as if on cue. I poop, Giggle, I poop. My sister needs a clean diaper, said Gregor, somehow feeling embarrassed. The roach, as if he could read it right, acted impressed. Ah, come closer, come. Can we closer come? Said the roach, delicately sweeping the space in front of it with a leg. We? Said Gregor. Then he saw the other forms rising out of the dark around them. The smooth black bumps he had taken for rocks were actually the backs of another dozen or so enormous cockroaches. They clustered around Boots, eagerly waving their antennas in the air and shuddering in delight. Boots, who loved any kind of compliment, instinctively knew she was being admired. She stretched out her chubby arms to the giant insects. I poop, she said graciously, and they gave an impressive hiss. Be she Princess Overlander, be she? Be she queen, be she? Asked the leader, dipping its head in a slavish devotion. Boots, a queen? Said Gregor. Suddenly, he had to laugh. The sound seemed to rattle the roaches, and they withdrew stiffly. Laugh? Why, Overlander, laugh? Why? One hissed, and Gregor realized he had offended them. Because we're, poor, and she's kind of a mess, and... Are you calling me Overlander? He wound up lamely. Be you not Overlander humor, be not you? Said the torch-bearing roach, peering closely at him. You look much like, but smell like. Something seemed to dawn on the leader. Rat bad. It turned to its comrades. Leave we Overlanders here, leave we? The roaches drew closely together in consultation, and it all began to talk at once. Gregor caught snippets of their conversation, but nothing made sense. They were so immersed in their debate that he thought about trying to escape again. He looked at his surroundings. In the dim torchlight, they appeared to be in a long, flat tunnel. We need to go back up, thought Gregor. Sideways. He could never scale the walls of the hole they had fallen down with Boots in his arms. The roaches came to a decision. You come, Overlander. Take to humans, said the leader. Humans, said Gregor, feeling relieved. There are other humans down here? Ride you? Run you? Asked the roach, and Gregor understood it was offering him a lift. It didn't look sturdy enough to carry him, but he knew some insects, like ants, could carry many times their weight. He had a sickening image of trying to sit on the roach and crushing it. Oh. What? Ah! Yeah, bite. Okay, sorry. I think I'll walk, run, said Gregor. Ride the princess, ride she? Said the roach hopefully, waving its antennas ingratiatingly and flattening itself on its stomach before Boots. Gregor would have said no, but the toddler climbed right up on the roach's back. He should have known. She loved to sit on the giant metal turtles at the Central Park Zoo. Okay, but she has to hold my hand, said Gregor, and Boots obediently latched onto his finger. The roach took off immediately, and Gregor found himself jogging to keep up with it. He knew roaches could move fast. He'd watched his mother swat enough of them. Apparently, those giant roaches had maintained their speed with their size. Fortunately, the floor of the tunnel was even, and Gregor had only finished up track a few weeks ago. He'd adjust his pace to match the roaches and soon found a comfortable rhythm. The tunnel began to twist and turn. The roaches veered into side passages and even doubled back to choose a new route sometimes. In minutes, Gregor was hopelessly lost, and the mental picture of their past that he'd been making in his head resembled one of Boots' squiggly drawings. He gave up trying to remember directions and concentrated on keeping up with the insects. Sorry, guys. Sorry, guys, lost my spot. Gregor began to pant, but the roaches didn't show any visible signs of exertion. He had no idea how far they were going. Their destination could be 100 miles away. Who knew how far these things could run? Just then, he was about to tell them he needed to rest. Gregor heard a familiar roar. At first, he thought he was mistaken, but as they drew closer, he felt sure it was a crowd. And, judging by the sound of it, a big one. But where could you fit a crowd in these tunnels? The floor began to slope sharply, and Gregor found himself backpedaling to avoid stepping on the roach leader. Something soft and feathery brushed against his face and arms. Fabric? Wings? He passed through the stuff, and the unexpected light nearly blinded him. His hand instinctively covered his eyes as they tried to adjust. A gasp went up from a crowd. He'd been right about that part. Then it got unnaturally quiet, and he had the sense that a great number of people were looking at him. Gregor began to make out his surroundings. It wasn't really that bright. In fact, it seemed like evening, but he'd been in darkness so long he couldn't tell. The first thing he made out was the ground, which appeared to be covered with a dusky green moss, except it wasn't uneven but smooth as pavement. He could feel its springiness under his feet. It's a field, he thought, for some kind of game. That's why there's a crowd. I'm in a stadium. Slowly it came into focus. A polished wall enclosed a large oval cavern about 50 feet high. The top of the oval was ringed with bleachers. Gregor's eyes traveled up the distant rows of people as he tried to find the ceiling. Instead, he found the athletes. A dozen bats were slowly spiraling around the top of the arena. They ranged in color from light yellow to black. Gregor guessed the smallest one had a wingspan of 15 feet. The crowd must have been watching them when he stumbled in because the rest of the field area was empty. Maybe it's like Rome and they feed people to the bats. Maybe that's why the roaches brought us here, he thought. Something fell from one of the bats. It hit the ground in the middle of the stadium and bounced 50 feet into the air. He thought, "Oh, it's just a ball!" cried Boots. And before he could stop her, she had slid off the roach, wiggled through the other bugs, and started to run across the mossy ground with her little flat-footed stride. "Most graceful, the princess," hissed a roach dreamily as Gregor headed after her. The insects had shifted easily to let Boots by, but they were an obstacle course for him. Either they were intentionally trying to slow him down, or they were so taken with Boots's beauty that they had forgotten about him entirely. The ball hit the ground a second time and bounced back into the air. Boots ran after it, reaching her arms high above her head to follow its path. As Gregor broke free of the roaches and ran for his sister, a shadow passed over him. He looked up and to his horror saw a golden bat diving straight down at Boots. He'd never reach her in time. "Boots!" he screamed, feeling his stomach contract. She turned around to him and saw the bat for the first time. Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Bat!" she shouted, pointing at the monstrous animal above her. Geez, thought Gregor, doesn't anything scare her? The bat swooped over Boots, lightly brushing her finger with its belly fur, and then soared back into the air in a loop. At the top of the arc, while the bat was flat on its back, Gregor noticed for the first time that someone was sitting on it. The rider had its legs wrapped around the bat's neck. He realized it was a girl. The upside-down girl released her legs and dropped off the bat's back. She executed a perfect double-back flip, twisting around at the last moment to face Gregor's direction, and landed on the ground as lightly as a cat in front of Boots. One hand went out, and the ball fell into it in what was either a feat of remarkable timing or incredible luck. Gregor looked at the girl's face and could tell by her arrogant expression that there had been no luck involved at all. And kids, that is the end of chapter 2. I cannot wait to find out what happens. It's so easy out here, but I am a professor of many things, and being in the woods is it's my passion. It's my passion. Okay. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but I have this brand new lipstick because a professor has to look her best at all times. So again, I want everybody to take notes. And remember, this is for all of my children. It's for you, Evan, had a meal, but it's for all of my children. Well, this is me again, Professor Phlam. Signing off. That's how I salute. I give you a really quick, it's a quick, I think they call it a snap. It's more of like a signing off.